Hello and welcome to our 20th session on Davinci result and our 7th session on color grading. Now here in our last 6 sessions you came to know about the basics of color grading. What is corrective grading, what is creative grading, and after understand these things we are now going to jump into the world of color management. But before we understand what is color management, we have to understand some basics of color. Now basically, how do we see color? How do we see objects in nature? Well, whatever we see through our eyes in our everyday life is all through a principle called as reflection principle. Reflection principle means to see an object you need a source light. Say for example, in daylight if you are enjoying a beautiful landscape, you need sunlight to see it. Sunlight is the source of our light, and this source light is nothing but an electromagnetic radiation between 4000 to 7000 Armstrong unit, for which our eye is sensitive. So color and vision is a human sensation. Now when we are seeing the visual, the light from the source comes and hits on the object, and some objects have a property where it reflects all the light that falls on it, and such kind of object appears to be to us as white. And similarly, there are some objects which have the property to absorb all the light falling on them, and a subject which absorbs all the light falling on it gives back no light to our eyes, and so we see it as black. However, there are certain objects which absorb a part of light, a part of this visual frequency, and give back a part of this visual frequency. To give you a very good example, when you see the sky, we call this as also as a Raman effect. Actually, in reality, if you see, if the light from the sun goes into the space, and if it goes in the space and if it doesn't get reflected at all, then you should see your sky as black, because you doesn't get back any light. But why does the sky appear blue? Because the water droplets and the moisture present in the atmosphere is actually going to reflect back that light to our eyes. And here what happens is, the property of this moisture is, when it reflects back, it reflects a frequency of about 4800 to 5300 Armstrong unit more than other spectrum. So that's why this frequency of light, when it comes and hits on our eye, we sense it as blue. So this is the reason why sky is blue. There is nothing, see, this is a visual illusion wherein water drops that are present in the moisture is reflecting back the light, and when it is reflecting, since it is reflecting the blue spectrum more, we are seeing the sky as blue. Now similarly, if you take a red rose, when white sunlight comes and falls on the red flower, what happens? The property of that flower is that it absorbs all the radiations from the sun, but gives back only 7000 Armstrong unit light back to our eye. And because of this, what happens? We see that flower as red. Now similarly, if you see a green leaf, the property of the green leaf is, whatever light, sunlight is falling on it, it absorbs all the color and gives back only 4800 Armstrong unit of color, and that's why it appears green. So the vision or the color that we are seeing in nature comes because of the different reflective properties of different subjects. So that this is how we are seeing the color. So basically, theoretically speaking or scientifically speaking, what we say is, whatever color we see in nature, it might be blue, magenta, violet or purple, whatever color you see, all these colors are either one of the 7 colors of the spectrum or a combination of these spectrum colors, and this is how we see different shades of color. However, when it comes to practical purposes, we use a principle called as the tricolor principle. Now, before I go to tricolor principle, I just want you to refer to another source of light through which we see the images, and that is called as radiation principle. And this radiation principle of seeing the picture, we started to experience it in the late 19th century and in the early part of 20th century, when television was actually discovered or invented. So when the invention of television happened, we started to see the picture in another principle which was called as radiation principle. So basically, what is radiation principle? In radiation principle, we doesn't have a source light which goes and hits the object and comes back to us. Actually, when you see a television is nothing but a screen with thousands of electric bulbs. And say for example, if you take a screen, a television, a 2K television, you can consider it as a panel which has 1920 bulbs arranged horizontally, and similarly you have 1080 rows of such light. So this is an arrangement and matrix of all electric bulbs. And so how you see television? When you are seeing the vision, these bulbs gets illuminated to different brightness, and because of that we see the image. That's why when you watch a television, or today when you watch a mobile phone, you are not going to give any source light to it. You get light from that source, and this is called as the radiation principle. And remember, here I also want you to, when it comes to cinema and video, when you go to a theater and watch a cinema, you are seeing it using reflection principle. Because how do you see a cinema in theater? You have a projector inside which we have our, in olden days they used to put the film reels, and today we have our digital content which is played on a screen, and that screen is like a television screen which is actually using a lens enlarged onto the full screen. And here the light from that screen goes and falls on a big screen, and from that screen the light gets reflected back and we are seeing the image. So in a theater we sit in a dark room and we have a white screen in front of us, and on that white screen we are going to project the image and we are going to feel the movie. This is called as the reflection principle. Whereas how do we see a mobile phone or a television? We see it through radiation principle. And in a television we does not use any projector or anything to project to it. What that does is, it has number of minute bulbs which emits light back to us. Okay, and that's why in reflection principle, the color of the screen that we use to see the image is pure white. So, whenever you go to the theaters, you can see the screen color is always white. The more white your screen is, the more contrast and rich your image will be. Now, similarly, if you come to a television, you can observe that whether it is your mobile phone or your television, the original color of the screen is black. So, you can consider cinema as writing on a white paper using a color ink, and this color ink, whenever you have a white paper and when you write on it, we write it with black color, red color, green color, like this. However, it is like using a black slate and you are writing it with a white chalk piece. So, this difference you have to understand. So, now once we know this difference, we know what is cinema reflection principle and what is radiation principle. Now, the next thing that we have to now understand is, we have to now understand that in case of radiation principle, first I will come to mobile and TV. So, in case of radiation principle, although theoretically we say that all colors in nature is made up of 7 colors, okay, but for practical purposes we say that all colors in nature is made up of only 3 colors, and these 3 colors are called as the primary colors, and the 3 primary colors that we use are called as red, green and blue. So, for practical purposes, for the purpose of your TV or your mobile, we say that all colors in nature is made up of 3 colors, red, green and blue. And now you may ask, where is white? Well, if red, green and blue lights are projected to your eye at the same time, when these 3 colors gets mixed, when these 3 light bulbs gets mixed, the color you get is white. So, similarly, if there is no red, no green, no black, there is no emission from your monitor or your screen, and so you get black. Okay. So, that is why in your phone, to save power, we always use a dark mode. Why do we use a dark mode in television and mobiles? When you use dark mode, unwanted areas of the screen where you doesn't have any photograph or any text to read, all those areas will be kept black, so that there is no more, the screen is not going to draw more power to illuminate it. So, that is why we use screen savers. If your monitor is on, after 5 minutes it turns black, so that when it turns black, all the lights are switched off or it draws the minimum wattage of current. So, here, so now we have red, we have green, we have blue, and mixing these 3 colors you get white. Now, you may ask, where is yellow? How do we see yellow in television? Well, if you mix red with green, the color you get is yellow. Okay. So, if red and green gets mixed, we get a color called as yellow. Now, similarly, if red, green and blue gets mixed, the color we get is called as cyan. And similarly, if red and blue gets mixed, you get a purple tint of color which we call as magenta. So, we call this as a color triangle. So, in primary color, you have three colors, red, green and blue. If you mix all the three, you get white. Red and green gives you yellow, green and blue gives you cyan, and red and blue gives you magenta. Okay, so this is all about your primary colors. Now, you may think, okay, what I am saying is red, green and blue if you mix white. So, tomorrow you take a paint box and in the paint box on a white paper put red color, put green color, put blue color and mix it and see whether you see white. You don't get white there because this red, green and blue works only with radiation principle. It doesn't work with paint. Only when you use a red bulb or a red light, only when you use a green light, only when you use a blue light and project all these three lights on a screen, and if you see it, you see it as white, because these principles work in radiation principle. But if you come to cinema, cinema uses another kind of principle which we call as reflection principle. Or say for example, when you watch a photograph, you have taken a photo and you are not on a mobile screen, but on a paper. When you watch a photograph, how are you seeing the photo? You are leaving a source light on the photo and you are seeing the picture. So, the photo you are seeing is a reflection principle, and in this case this color system changes. In case of reflection principle, when you are writing some drawing on a white paper, when you are doing a painting on the white paper, then we say all the colors in the nature is made up of three colors again, but this time it is not red, green and blue, but we say the three colors that we use now are yellow, magenta and cyan. So, in case of a reflection principle, when you are writing on a paper, if you want a particular area of your picture white, the source color of the paper itself is white. You need not paint anything. You can leave it as it is. So, now you are going to paint only the other shades. So, now if you want black, how do we get black? If you mix yellow, magenta and cyan, you get the black color. But here what happened was, now the first problem you have is mixing of yellow, magenta and cyan doesn't give you pure black color. Okay, so it is not pure black, it will be a dark brown tint. And second thing is, when you are actually doing a drawing and if you draw something in black, mix yellow, magenta, cyan, you have to waste three colors to get this black color. So, that is why in reflection principle, instead of tricolor principle, we use a minimum of 4 color principle, because black we eliminate it and we keep it as a separate color and it is called by the symbol K. So, that is why in reflection principle the color profile we use is cyan, magenta, yellow and black, and we call this as C, M, Y and K. Whereas in television and mobile, the color profile we use is only 3 colors, R, G and B. So, you should first understand that the colors we see are of 2 main profiles. One is for the reflection principle and another is for the radiation principle. So, this is the basic that you have to first understand. So, after understanding this basic, now the next thing you may ask is, what is this color management? What is color calibration? So, for this today what happens is, say for example, I will first come to photography or print. Say for example, you have to design a poster or you have to design the logo of a company or you have to design our national flag which has orange, white and green. Now what happens is, when you are designing it, the actual color orange and green, from where does it come? It comes from the printer that you use to print it. And in every printer, if you take any color printer available in the market, it uses 4 inks in it. Basically it makes use of 4 inks: cyan, magenta, yellow and black. So what does this color printer do is, it is going to put whichever area is pitch black, it will use the black color. Whichever area is red, for red what you have to do is, you have to mix magenta with cyan. If you mix magenta and cyan, the color you get is red. So this you have to understand very carefully. That's why, see, red, green, blue, you see these 2 triangles, red, green and blue. If you mix everything is white. Red and blue is cyan, blue and green is blue and green is cyan, red and blue is magenta and red and green is yellow. Now in the other spectrum, you have yellow, magenta and cyan, and if you mix magenta and yellow, the color you are going to get is yellow is red and green and magenta is red and blue. So the common color that you have is red. So if you mix yellow and magenta, the color you are going to get is red. And if you mix yellow and blue, yellow is red and green, blue is yellow is red and green and cyan is blue and green. So the common color is green. So if you mix yellow and that is cyan, the color you are going to get is green. Similarly, if you mix magenta and cyan, the color you are going to get is blue. So when you mix primary colors, you get supplementary colors or the secondary colors, and when you mix secondary colors, you get primary colors. And if you mix cyan, magenta, yellow together, we call it as black, but in this case for black we use a different color. So this is a concept that you should first go to your mind. So we use CMYK for all prints and RGB for that is radiation principle for television and mobile. Now what is color management or color? We call this as color calibration. Color calibration is a color corrective system where the reproduced color that you reproduce on your television or in cinema should be same as the original color. To give you the best example, say for example you are seeing your wedding video or you are seeing some film. See, now what happens is, say you have participated in a wedding video and you are watching that wedding video and you have worn a blue saree and you have gone to the wedding, and when you are seeing in the TV, you pause the video, you bring your saree and hold it next to the saree color on your television and observe the color. Very rarely the color matches. The color never matches. The blue you will be seeing on the recorded TV will always be different from the blue or green color that you are seeing in reality. There will be a color difference. However, the thing is, the human color memory is very weak. It's very difficult for us to recognize and actually keep colors in memory. So that's why you might have heard when ladies go to purchase blouse piece for their saree, they cannot see the saree in their house, go to the shop and ask him to give the same color. So to get the same color, what they do? They carry the saree with them and they ask the shopkeeper to hold the saree next to the blouse piece and they are going to match the color, because human color memory is very weak. So even though you are seeing a different blue color, you doesn't feel it, because you only feel it when you bring the actual saree and hold it next to it. Now The real beautiful color correction is the correction when you hold your actual saree next to the recorded saree, and if you see the color, if both are same, it means that the color calibration is perfect. So in reality, it is very difficult. See, even your skin tone, what is your real skin color and what is the color you are seeing on the screen can never be the same. There will always be a difference. Say, when you see a film actor, say for example, you see Shah Rukh Khan or Aishwarya Rai or Katrina Kaif. So when you are seeing on the screen, they look very different. Say for example, you are traveling and suddenly in metro, you have a film actor coming. He doesn't appear similar to what you are seeing in the theater. You will be shocked, oh, he looks like this, he is just a common man like me. Because the thing here is, when he has been projected on the screen, we use a system called as creative grading, and using this creative grading, we have enhanced his skin tone, we have made his skin tone appear rich and colorful. But in reality, it is just, if you make him stand very next in the theater next to his screen and you compare the screen color, only if he applies a similar kind of makeup and if it comes, you can make out the means it appears similar, or you can easily make out the difference. So all this is because of the change in the color profiles. So now here one last thing I want to tell you about this color profile is, when you are using colors, now say I already told you, whatever color you see on a photograph or you see on a paper depends on your printer. What is the tint of yellow ink that you use in your printer? What is the tint of your cyan ink? What is the tint of your blue ink? Now here what happens is, basically today in desktop publishing, when you actually design some posters or images, the main issue we will have is, when we are watching this on the television, we are using a profile called as RGB profile. Because TV works on RGB, but when you take the same thing as a print, now what happens? It gets converted as CMYK profile. So that's why in most of this desktop publishing application, you will have a proofreading facility where you can make your workspace CMYK and just see how on the paper that image is going to appear. So for this, what we do is, every printer, say whether it is Kodak or Epson or any company of printer, when they release the printer, along with that printer, they release one color calibration profile. We usually in print we call this as Pantone colors or different types of color tones. And what you have to now do is, when you are working with Photoshop, you have to install this color profile, choose that color profile and see that color profile matches this. So this we do it in Photoshop. This we call it as the color calibration. Now when you use the same profile, now your Photoshop software, what it will do is, it will remap the red, yellow, magenta and cyan colors. So now here, now the color matching is done using this profile. So that's why the printer profile is very important for you when you actually match the color. So the same thing goes even with video. When you are using a camera, say for example, first thing is, you should know which camera you are using and what type of Kodak you are using it to record it. How are you actually combining these RGB signals and how are you actually saving it? Actually in one future class we are going to discuss about this compression techniques and the video codecs. Codecs means it is called as coder and decoders. The videos are coded into the four color signals, RGB signals are coded together and then it is decoded. It is coded in the camera and decoded in your monitor or decoded in your computer when you play it back. So, that is why we call it as codecs, and these codecs are used to actually reduce the space, compress it and store it on your hard disk. Now, most of the camera, your mobile camera or most of the ordinary cameras that you use all record the video and it will code it and record it, and in the player we are going to decode it. And when it does this coding and encoding, we use different format. We use QuickTime format, we use H.264, we use Apple ProRes. So, all these are the coding and decoding techniques or the formats that we use. We are going to discuss it later in detail, but what you have to now understand is, when you are recording the camera, what is the codec used in the camera and what is the decoder you are using in your software or in your player. If it matches, you will get the correct color. So, that is why now in our next class we are going to discuss about how to take images from different sources and do the color calibration. This is what we call as color management. Now, apart from this, one last thing I have to discuss in this class is, in some cases we are not going to code and decode these colors. We are going to take the raw RGB data as it is and store it. If you have the raw RGB data, since there is no coding and decoding, you will have complete control over how to calibrate it in your software. We call this kind of format where we doesn't use codec to compress or to code and decode it, we call this as the raw format, RAW, raw format. We have this raw format both in photos and in videos. Now, say for example, in a wedding photography, if you are doing candid photography and if you are going to do color grading later in Photoshop, then we use a software called Camera Raw, which is built into Photoshop, and we are going to shoot our picture in raw format. So, actually any photograph, if you take it in JPEG, if it is 4 MB, in raw format it will be 30 MB. The size of the file will be very big, but the advantage you have is you will have the maximum control when you do color grading, and the same thing applies to video also. In video, if you are making a cinema, the difference between making a cinema and making a television video is, in case of television, even if you use codec and decode, that is coded signals, it will not be a problem. You can use Apple ProRes or DNX, any of this coding and decoding format, and you can record the video. So, that will not be an issue. But when in case of cinema, what happens again is, the camera is working on RGB principle, but when you project it and see it on the screen, you are using the CMYK principle, because it is by reflection you are seeing. So, the profiles has to be matched, and that is why for cinema, if you want to shoot something, you should choose a camera which has the raw output. So, any camera which can record the camera data and store it in raw format. If you have this raw data, that is, you have Blackmagic design camera or Ariflex or Blackmagic, that is red camera, you take any of this camera, when you are doing the shooting and recording it, you have to record it in raw format. So, the difference here is, in case of a coded signal, if 1 minute of video, if it takes around 2 GB data, in case of raw format, 1 minute of video will take about 6 to 8 GB of data. So, just imagine, for 1 minute if it is using 8 GB, then for 10 minutes it takes 80 GB. So, when you are recording it in raw format, you have to have huge storage. For every about 10 minutes, 20 minutes shot, you have to keep replacing your SD card or your SSD drives, so that you can means you can only record around 10 to 20 minutes video in this raw format. So, but the advantage you have is later on when you bring it to the computer and in Davinci Resolve when you do the color grading, you will have perfect control to manipulate it. So, now one thing that I have left with is HDR, high dynamic range. We are going to discuss it later, but as of now in this session we have just discussed about the basics of color. So, understanding these basics today, now in the next session I am going to introduce you to the color management. So, let us start our color management and color profiling from our next session. Thank you.